Well, I'm happy to be here. It's been a while since you and I have caught up, so I look at this as a really fun opportunity.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Yes, it's been far too long. So I'm excited to catch up. Before we jump into your current state, if you could just share quickly about how you got into impact, kind of get us settled in your background.
So I'm actually going to turn this question a little bit upside down. Of course, I looked at some of your other talks and I've actually seen them periodically on LinkedIn, and I knew this would come up. And I would have to say, from a technical perspective, a lot of people would say I'm not in social impact. However, and this is where I'm turning it a little bit upside down, I would actually suggest or even argue that we're all in social impact from the minute we come out of the womb. Because what is social impact but the influence and the relationship you have with the people around you, with the world, with larger society, etc. So really everything we do has a social impact. And so I would say I've had a social impact from day one. And in terms of a positive social impact, I was basically brought up to have a positive social impact. I watched, and I hesitate to say this only because I'm really going to date myself right now, but I used to watch my mother run a mimeograph machine in our garage for a women's organization to print out things. So from day one, I was brought up to have a social impact. We always put clothes in a bag to donate. It's just always been my modus operandi has been about considering how the things I do impact other people and impact the world, society at large, and the planet. It's just been how I was raised from day one. So you know a
And it
little bit
shows.
about my career, so you can actually ask other pointed questions if you'd like to.
No, no, and it shows. And I would say, anybody who follows you on LinkedIn, and everybody should, sort of sees that human spirit come through. And you don't look at things through, process or entities. Like you as a person really try to pull out the humanity in your work and in the people who you work with, which is amazing. If you could share a little bit about, you know, where you are now, that would be
Yeah.
amazing.
So I would have to say at the moment, I probably have a bit of what people would label as a portfolio career. I've come through intense corporate life, variety of things. I ran my own business. And I went on a journey, which you know a good part of, that led me to write my book, Do Good. I never intended to write a book. It's just suddenly the world, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, gave me this message that I felt I had to put out there to help people. And since I wrote my book, I've been on a pathway that's completely unexpected for me. I ended up speaking globally. I spoke at the UN. That led me to work at an INGO for a while. And when COVID hit, a lot of my job for me was naturally coming to an end because of how I approached it, because I helped reorient things and some things in the organization and do things like that. And then when COVID hit, much of where I was going to try to push my job actually came to a conclusion because we couldn't travel. And one of the things that, and I'll just share this because maybe, who knows, maybe someone out there is interested in supporting an initiative like this because I still think it's a cool idea. But one of the things, I worked at an INGO that had both on-ground programs in the developing world, as well as the first global philanthropist circle amongst major philanthropists. And one of the things we did with the philanthropists was take them on learning journeys to go experience other major philanthropists' work and see and learn from each other and learn from being in the communities where they're supporting people, giving people agency, learning hands-on. And coming from corporate world, and I know it's politically incorrect to actually still like corporations, but I do because of the scale of impact they have and how if we fix a corporation and we fix the supply chain or we fix the way they treat people, we can change the world almost overnight sometimes. And that's exciting to me. That scale is really exciting. And that doesn't mean social entrepreneurialism is a bad thing. I think we need both things. I don't think it's about eliminating one for the other. But having a corporate orientation and seeing those learning journeys, as right before COVID hit, I had this idea of what if we create journeys for the C-suite or even mid-managers or people in sustainability or bring people from supply chain, whichever groups of people we want to do. What if we create learning journeys where we take different groups of people in the corporate world on ground to these communities that they either support in places they've never been and never actually, most people had an inclination to go, or in communities where they receive their products, their supply chain, in other words. And what if we took people in there and had them sit side by side with people in these communities and start learning to give them agency in that way and develop corporate programs and change supply chains from that perspective? So that's one vision that always sits in my head. And maybe one day I'll get to do that, but I still think it would be an amazing experience and opportunity, because once people meet people, they start discovering that actually we're all in it to help our families, to support one another. You give people agency rather than seeing yourself as above them, which sometimes happens is, oh, we know better. But actually, they know better about how to fix their lives. So I'll set that little project that one day I hope I get to do aside.
That's a wish list project. Tell us.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but perhaps that's it, and I'm throwing it out there. So maybe the universe will grab it for me.
Okay, so hopefully somebody's help Anne.
But in reality, what I'm doing at the moment is living in this journey. Took me to this INGO, and then I left during COVID and returned to the corporate world, because everything I'd been advocating for and promoting and everything that I was doing in my work from day one, and how I worked with other people even, was suddenly manifest as real because of the pandemic and because of the issues corporations were having to deal with. And so I returned to that space, initially polished up my consulting practice, and then realized that actually I could impact more people and play in a bigger sandbox on a larger playground if I was just me. And so I had an interesting conversation with your team, and this has been happening for me recently, about which title do I use? Because I'm finding titles at the moment somewhat confining, because I'm working with a variety of different people. I work with one small creative agency that just won small purpose agency of the year from Ad Age, called The Company, which does great work and is really passionate, both creatively extraordinary and gifted, and really passionate and believes in having a positive social impact in whatever way they can through their campaign work and working with clients and seeing things from a wider perspective. So I work with them. I also am working with a communications firm that's out of Malaysia and Bangladesh, and we just won a communications project for IPPF, International Planned Parenthood Federation, to help rebrand them. So I'm an advisor on that team. And then one of my favorite projects that I'm working on now is with a group of people, mostly out of the UK, who I know from my years living it there, called Humanness, which at the essence is about bringing human qualities back into business, which is at the core of everything I've done. And when you look at the Me Too We continuum of my model of brand citizenship, which is what emerged and motivated me to write a book, when you look at that, it's about how you balance me, individual integrity, and making people integral with how you deliver to the community, and see each individual component of the community as integral and having to connect to that community, to have that community living in harmony and in its own integrity. So and we could get into a cucamonga, as my husband calls it, or woo-woo space, in that, as simple as that at the moment.
And what I'll say is, you've been able to accomplish this, whether there's a naysayer or somebody who calls it something, whatever. The bottom line is, like, you have sat in rooms and you've been able to open up people's hearts so that they could see something that they didn't see when they walked in the door, so that they could all accomplish together something that was beneficial for the community, for the environment. So I'm wondering, imagine that you're sitting in a lecture hall or just across having a coffee with somebody who's within an organization who sees an opportunity to open up people's hearts. Like, what are 1, 2, 3 pieces of advice you would give that person in setting the table to really make that conversation true?
So I think, and I think this is part of my own personal journey, is really starting to more and more feel comfortable tapping into who you really are. When you work in a corporate world, and less so now than when I started, but you're forced to put cloaks on. And you have to just wake up yourself one day and say, I'm not doing that anymore. I I worked at a time when women often didn't speak about their children. I used to talk about my son. I used to have a picture of him on my desk. Some people did, some people didn't. And it sounds now a little silly, but at the time it was about stepping out. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing little by little, is stepping out. So my advice and guidance to people is about, it's so trendy right now, bringing your whole self to work, all this other stuff. But there's parts of yourself that do belong in the office and parts of yourself that don't. And I am a little old fashioned sometimes and like appropriateness and like things a little formally and things like that. But simultaneously, you can just approach things from your heart. We're taught so much to go from our minds and not lead with our heart. And again, this can get into a whole different conversation, but I'm going to leave it in a much more physical beta conversation, beta wave versus an alpha wave conversation, which is some of what we do with humanness, is how you balance those two things. But I remember when I started at Interbrand many years ago, I went out to San Francisco because there were some problems in the office at the time. And I helped fix some issues that were going on with HP. And then we had a project with Autodesk, and it was with a sub company they had called Discrete, which did very high-end software for movies. So they're, like the Pixar kind of movie stuff. And there were some challenges. Our creative team, actually, I was working with Palm at the time too and doing focus groups, and actually they walked out. The entire creative and senior team in the San Francisco office left to start their own business, which now is very successful. And they were really glad I was there because they didn't tell me, but they knew I was going to take care of the clients. So it's about bringing your heart and letting people believe that you're going to do what's right and be responsible. But this, I'm diverting and going off into memory land, so I'm going to apologize for that. But the story I wanted to tell was about being yourself. We went to Discrete, and this was at the same time these people, I think they were about to leave or had just left. So there was just tension in the air, and you felt it. And there was a lot of problems going on with the project. And I'm the New Yorker going to an office in San Francisco, which always is a little bit of a challenge to begin with. And it's a different dynamic in how you're doing. And I'm in my beautiful suit that I'm wearing. And I walk in the office and there's no place to sit or anything. And everybody's sort of scattered around. And there was a place on the floor. And I just plopped myself down on the floor. I didn't even think about it. And I'm in this beautiful suit and 4-inch high heels. And the woman who I was with from the San Francisco office, years later, when I went back to people and I was trying to explore and reflect on what I should do next, I asked people sort of what did I do versus what did we do versus what was Interbrand's process, blah, blah, blah. And Jimena came back to me and said, I'll always remember how we really didn't want this senior person from New York coming into the San Francisco office. And you arrived in this, killer suit, killer heels, probably looked like I was walking out of Devil Wears Prada. Then we go to this meeting and there's this tension. And you just plopped down on the floor and started talking. So sometimes you just have to move from where you are and not think about it and just allow yourself to just come out, because that's how you do warm people up to being more heartfelt and connecting and solving problems in ways that you might not have otherwise done.
I think it's a really important and honestly, very fresh perspective. I don't know. Many people listening will sort of have experienced something like what you just described. I think that it is a special way to exist in the world. I hope this finds somebody who needs that piece of advice. And, I can't believe it, but Power Chats are quick and we're already at our last question. And this is one about what you see coming down the pike. So as you think about the future, I know you say you're not typically an impact, but you are an impact warrior through and through from day one. Where do you see the work going?
It's a hard question, especially because there's so much up in the air right now globally. The geopolitical, we can't separate a lot of what we do from geopolitics, but we can separate out our daily actions from geopolitics and not allow it to overwhelm us and just keep stepping forward. And I am heartened that everyone I work with, even in large corporations that I do think have no idea of what purposes I define it truly is and social impact truly is, people are moving forward. And there is, even though on the outside, the way the media paints things, sometimes it looks like ESG is dead, purpose is dead, this is dead, that's dead. And the problem is because we love isms. We love the big solution. And I think we're flowing into a new space that actually may not be about the big solution. Hero stepping down. We love the hero journey. It's one of the 7 basic myths that drive us. And we look at each of these new management trends as the hero. And I think maybe as a society, as a business sector, we're maturing past hero journeys. And we're seeing things as, let's just keep going and pushing forward. So even though some people say, shareholders are winning over stakeholders and all things like that, I think we're moving into a space that may bring us to greater balance, greater harmony. We're moving out of Newtonian physics and driving the world from that perspective. And the whole notion of quantum physics pervading us little by little. And I think we're just going to start hopefully moving into a place where people are not looking for the hero, not looking for the rescuer, but saying, this is my job and this is how I can have a good, positive impact on the world. If I go back to my definition of social impact of everything we do. And hopefully we're getting to a point where we each see the responsibility we all have and not push it off on someone else and this hero coming in to rescue us. That we are our own heroes. That's what I would like us to get to, and what I sort of see happening in the sidelines.
I co-sign that. I think it's an incredible message to everybody listening. I love that you carry that banner in everything that you do. Appreciate so much. And, I'll just leave you with a much more pedestrian example that we say in our house all the time, which is a quote from Frozen 2, which is when one of the characters is in a really tricky situation. There's a song that says, do the next right thing. And all you can do is put one step in front of the other and do the next right thing.
Yes. So let's have that as the future. Do the next right thing.